Pleased to see so many council members. We've got lots of things in front of us to discuss. Appreciate your time as always. So what we'll do is we'll do attendance. We'll adopt the agenda, do our approval of the agenda and meeting minutes, and then get into a conversation about the status of the plan. So, oh my gosh, I have PEC twice. Sorry, that distracted me. That doesn't happen very often. I've got double PEC videos. That's pretty funny. So I don't know if that's just me or anybody else. All right, let's go ahead and do roll call, which means I need to get my list in front of me. Even with the list in front of me, it is possible for me to miss a name because I'm that scattered from time to time. So, all right, let's start with Director Ajaba from MDOT. Are you with us, Director Ajaba, or Niles? No, if I saw Niles.
Yeah, this is Niles. I'm here. I don't believe the director will be joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Niles. Next on the list is Frank Beaver, but he just let us know that he was unable to attend today. So Frank's not here. Director Corbin or John Herzer from Leo.
Hi, I'm Melissa Danzer. I'm here for Susan and Judd.
Oh, great. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
And then Mary Draves. Mary, thrilled to have you, of course.
I'm here.
Is
Thank you.
this your last? This isn't your last meeting yet, though. You still have.
I have to check to make
Okay.
sure. Yeah, so
I think we
here.
have you for at least one more, I would hope. So
Okay, good. Thank you.
railing her. Carrie Dugan. I see Carrie. Carrie's got a sweet backdrop today.
Well, you guys all recognize this backdrop. I'm at the DIA because my son, of course, isn't in school today. Good to see you all.
Again, I just saw you and he wasn't in school.
I'm telling you.
Okay. Okay, Director Eichinger.
Here.
Thank you, sir. Rachel Eubanks, Madam Treasurer, or Larry. I think we have Larry from Treasury.
Larry's here.
Larry's lobbying for snowshoeing if you missed it. For me, it'd be cross-country skiing. All right, Jim Harrison.
I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, glad to have you. Friends from DHHS, Director Hertel, perhaps Megan.
Megan Groves here.
Thanks, Megan. Brandon Hoffmeister from Consumers.
I'm here.
There's Brandon. Marnice Jackson. She's here. I just saw her. Oh, there she is. It always takes a minute to see people again after the videos all move around. Director Messer from MEDC. Hey, Quentin.
Present, thanks.
Peck.
I'm here on the phone while I try and figure out why my computer isn't working well with Microsoft Teams today. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, sir. Glad to have you. Tanya Splozlowski is not able to be here. She got pulled into something else at the last minute. Cynthia Williams was in the middle of my screen. Center takes the square.
Present.
Great, thank you. Phil Roos. Where did he run off?
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
There's Phil. Great, thanks, Phil. Chairman Scripps.
I am on. Hello.
There you are. Okay. Got to look around and find everybody. Darrell Slaughter.
Here.
Great. Thanks, Darrell. Sam Stolper.
Hi, Director Clark. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Sam. Great to see you. And Ron Fogelweed.
Here.
Thanks, Ron. Did I miss anybody or did anybody join us after we ran through names? I did. I missed Phyllis. How did I see? I said sometimes even with the list in front of me, there's Phyllis right there. Oh, and thank you, Phyllis. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, because I was going through the alphabet. I was like, okay, is she going backwards, forwards? Okay, it doesn't matter.
How did she get from Marnies to Quinton and skip Gary McDowell and Phyllis Meadows?
That's okay. I'm here.
Sorry.
Glad
I'm
to
gonna
be here.
drink this coffee right now. And I think I saw Joseph Rivet covering MDARD. Thank you, sir.
Oh, good.
All right. Well, we've determined that somebody else should do roll call from now on. Thanks, everybody, for participating. I do want to say up front, too, we have come to the time for some of our council members where it's time for reappointment. And so I just want to acknowledge, first of all, to all of you that we're working on those reappointments and that those conversations are being had. I was hoping that we could shake some things loose before today's meeting, but they're still in progress. So appreciate your patience with us and we'll stay in touch on that. So, but wanted to mention that up front. And I should also mention that under the appointments process, you are still a council member until something has changed. And so I think in many cases we'll see reappointments, or I know some of you are familiar that Mary's retiring. And so we'll move through the steps that are necessary there as well. So that'll be a different one for that reason. So okie dokie. So we have done 16 meetings together. Thanks everybody for all of your time and energy. I'm glad we're on number 2 here in 2022. What I'd like to do today first is take a look at the agenda and adopt that unless there's any concerns. We'll do meeting minutes and then move forward. So the agenda and materials came to you last week. So what our plan is for today is to talk through the status of the current plan, give you an update of the conversations that we've been having, an overview of what sort of things we've been hearing, talk to you about timelines going forward, and we've revised the outline. We're working through the plan, but we have the outline to talk about here today, and then hoping to get to some open discussions so that we can have additional feedback from all of you as we're moving through this process. So first up, I guess, let's go ahead and if there's a motion and a second, move the agenda and see if there's any discussion on the agenda.
I'll move, we accept the agenda, move the agenda.
Thanks, Mary.
Support, Brent.
Thank you. Any conversation on the agenda? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
All opposed, like sign. All right, agenda's in front of us. Let's put the meeting minutes in front of us and see if there's any comments on that. So if I can have a motion in a second for the January 11th meetings, that'd be great.
So move. Darrell.
Support.
Thanks, Darrell and Jim. Any conversations on the January 11th meeting minutes? And thanks to Kimber as usual for putting those together so quickly. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
Any opposition? All right, thanks everybody. Okie dokie. So moving forward, let's go ahead and talk through the plan. And I know I'm leading the slide deck. I don't know, Kimber, if you wanted me to put it up or if you're comfortable putting it up.
I can pull it up.
Thank you, ma'am. Great, thank you. I think it's cool that I can like navigate on it, even though you shared it. So cool. Hopefully that worked. Okay, so what we'd like to talk through today is where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. So trying to keep it in something that gives us good context to have conversation. So we've worked through all the written comments we've received, and you should have seen in your attachments from Friday's email from Kimber, additional materials that we've received through the listening sessions and other pieces of written comment. We've had a lot of meetings with stakeholders, a lot of one-on-ones with many of you. And I should mention that in terms of the stakeholder conversations, we've also continued to work through conversations with the tribes. We've been talking with labor, with industry, with NGOs, just like, you know, kind of wherever, anybody who wants to talk and everybody who wants to talk. We've been working hard to make sure that we get that conversation happening. We also held a variety of public listening sessions, and we hosted our second tribal consultation. So that was early in February. We had one in November as well. And so working hard to continue the important step of free outreach to the tribal governments. And so that conversation had happened as well. We got lots of feedback from that. You've received materials on our listening sessions, excuse me, as well as the written comments. We're working to consolidate all that and bring it together so that it is informative for the pieces of the plan where it fits in. I wanted to take a quick sidebar and talk a little bit. The executive recommendation for the budget came out a week ago too, and I just wanted to make this point because there's over $500 million in climate, energy, and mobility funding So we're not going to read all of this, but I'm going to make it all available to you. It gets smaller as we go, so it's going to get even worse. But this list is a list of dollars that were coming out of the 21-22 proposal, so about 115 million. And so that's a combination of an EV friendliness program, support for the Council on Future Mobilities in the office, and the workforce expansion that's necessary there. And then also the clean energy dollars that came through the ARP. As I said, it gets smaller. And so the new additions in this coming budget are 477 million. And so I tried to bold stuff, but it didn't really stand out very well. But it's a combination of 110 million for EV charging infrastructure, 5 million for planting of hardwood and conifer trees on private land, the climate resilient dollars for communities to deal with climate resiliency and infrastructure, these training and development opportunities that come through LEO. Of course, the governor making the public call for the EV rebate program that came out of the recommendations, and there's 50 million in that. That's part of the budget. Also, energy efficiency revolving loan fund, dollars for clean energy projects for families and businesses, money for MDOT to deal with some of their pumping station challenges that come out of flooding events, dollars for transitioning the state fleet, Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. So again, a lot of things articulated here. I think it's an important step to understand that while we're working through the plan crafting and receiving lots of important feedback on that, I think it complements the lead by example conversation that we all had together in December and really sets the stage for while we're working through the plan, there are pieces that are able to move forward. And I think it's important that policy and budget match up in order to support that forward action. So in terms of what we're doing, the deadline for comments has been extended to March 14th. And so what this ends up doing is bumping out delivery of the plan. So the plan then becomes delivered to the governor April 22nd, which is Earth Day. And, you know, this was something that we got a lot of feedback in terms of what people were seeing upon review, and we heard a lot that there was need for additional time for input so that people could give us feedback on what they were seeing. We also heard a lot from all of you as well as from other places that is really important to focus on action-oriented components for the plan. And so we're working in that into the material that ends up becoming the full-on plan. So an action-oriented roadmap for 2030. We heard a lot about a need for additional focus on environmental justice. That conversation certainly happened here in the council meetings as well as externally, and so wanted to make sure that we gave ourselves time to focus on that. There was also a issue raised about more focus on economic development. There's been a lot of conversation about the need to make sure that the plan considers adaptation. And then the other piece of information that we got pretty repetitively was making sure that there are real specific targets in more areas of the plan. So we're trying to pull all of that together and incorporate the feedback again from many different venues and figure out like what's the consistent feedback that we know needs to be broad based and, you know, cut across multiple areas, and then where's the more specific feedback that, you know, really drills down into a specific place. And so what I would say is you're not going to see, we're largely sticking to the priorities that the council's discussed and that have been lifted up by the plan before. I would say that what you're seeing is more specificity around those targets, and then also lifting up of things that happened in the work groups that needed more emphasis in the plan itself. So you can see an articulation here, a more extensive executive summary, again, that action-oriented roadmap that I articulated earlier, newer expanded sections on environmental justice, adaptation, industry, forest and lands, and then increasing focus on economic opportunity, climate impacts, and environmental justice. So what we're working through right now is making sure that we've integrated this feedback and incorporated it, and that we're prioritizing implementation strategies as well. So thinking through as we're on this road going forward, how do we make sure that we've got implementation and action pieces right in front of us? And to me, part of that reflects clear articulation of goals. I think that can be really helpful as we move forward. So what I'd like to do now is just walk at a high level through the revised outline. And I think that that hopefully will help you feel like you can see, you know, what I'm describing. And then what I was hoping we could spend time doing here today is talking through kind of an overview of if you think we're on the right track, how we think about, you know, high level buckets. Again, as we're working to orient those kind of North Star goals that we've articulated a few times, how do we make sure that we've got action steps towards those North Star goals? So I think it'll be informative to walk through how we've revised the timeline. Again, hoping that we've captured your feedback throughout all of this. So again, starting with a letter, and then in the executive summary, what we've tried to do is build a hierarchy. So we start with the governor's goals, talk about the impact of climate on the state. We got that feedback from a lot of different quarters where they said, make sure you're articulating the impact of climate on the state of Michigan. Talk about the urgency, the challenges, and the opportunities. And then again, you know, we've had this conversation here on a number of occasions. So the bifurcation of the 2050 goals and the 2030 needs, so that we're on that pathway to the 2050 goals. Talking about just resiliency and adaptation, of course, that lead by example component, and then next steps. So just in deeper articulation. So why climate matters to Michigan, including impacts of climate on the state, of course, the environmental justice component, and then how climate path moving forward can build economic opportunity for the state. I know that one of the things we heard was making sure that we've got as much material grounded in data. So we've worked to make sure that that greenhouse gas emission is up closer to the front and more articulate there. And then pull out Michigan in 2050 into a one page. So what would 2050 look like based on this plan going forward? So how do we look at those actions and tie that to the outcome of 2050? Importantly, again, the two separate sets of goals, then the 2030. So what we've done with the 2030 goals, and again, these are going to look very similar to what you've seen before, but what we've tried to do is parse them out so that each of them have a clear 4 tick marks underneath them. So what's that North Star goal? What are the strategies that are necessary to get us to that goal? Some background on the sector and the issue to make sure it's clearly defined, and then a discussion of how to prioritize strategies and additional tactics that fit under it. So when you look at these sections, I don't think they look very different than what we've talked about before. So centering environmental justice in all of our work. We've talked about making sure that we're cleaning the grid, mobility, electrifying vehicles, and increasing public transit, repairing and decarbonizing homes and businesses, protecting Michigan's land and water, and then driving innovation. And so I'm just going to click back for a second. The intent is, and what we're working on right now is each of those sections have a clear North Star goal underneath it, prioritize strategies, the background to describe it, and then a discussion of those priority strategies and additional tactics. So each of that fits under each of these. So again, not looking a lot different than what you saw before, but attempting to rearrange it in a way that helps the reader go on the path with us a little bit more. And then in terms of additions to the version that you saw before, a new section on adaptation, expansion on the leading by example in state government, and then conversation about implementation, which again is something that, you know, we really want to be working very much through all of you because of the resources that you bring to the table around implementation. And again, the intent that we need to partner together in order to move this work forward. And of course, lots of appendices. So with that, I'd be happy to take questions on that outline structure. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hand it over to Doug to take us through some thoughts and questions around conversation so that we can understand from all of you if we're moving down the right path. But first, I guess I'll open it up if there's questions around the outline, and I'm also going to let you know that I'm going to have a chance to call on some of our team members here who've been much more kind of in the nitty gritty of it than I have, if you've got questions that go further than I'm able to answer. So that's James and Corey's warning. Yes, I see Phyllis first.
Thanks, Director Clark. Yeah, I had, you hear that echo? I don't know why that is. I don't know. Okay, well, I'll just
I think
go.
it's okay now, Phyllis. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I just had two questions, maybe question kind of / comment / inquiry. On the environmental justice piece, because there are a lot of different angles from which to perhaps explore that, from the common one, inequities, to exposure, impact. So a lot of different ways to categorize that. And I know you may not have all the answers, but so maybe this is more comment as they work on that section, to be mindful of what we're really articulating in that space. And I'm hoping that the inequities that we see from things like making sure that every community in Michigan has an opportunity to participate in the workforce opportunities and the resilience efforts. So really just trying to position that in a way that's very inclusive. So I'll just say that. And then the second part of it is, I guess, more of a question, because prior to the outline you laid out and the details on some of the funding that's coming in, and I didn't see like a financial section, or maybe it's embedded in each of these areas, but I think it would be helpful to talk about where the money is going and even where it's coming from. So those are sort of my questions, kind of comments.
Yeah, thank you. So appreciate those thoughts on how we're incorporating the environmental justice components. And I don't know if anyone's on the team's got more thoughts there, but I think that's helpful. And I think that it aligns with what we're trying to make sure is characterized there. From a funding perspective, I wanted to bring up the exec rec because I think your money and your policy really do need to go hand in hand. I think that we've heard a couple of times that the budget piece is an important one. I think it's just a little in state government world. Usually the policy and the budget, while they are in parallel, the overlapping piece can sometimes get a little sticky. So I think we're trying to think that through. That being said, it's really, I completely agree, it's a really important piece. And I think there's, where are state dollars going, where are federal dollars going? And then in my mind, it's also I've heard this from all of you, how do we make sure that we are not leaving any dollar, or we're catching every dollar that's on the table? So anytime there's discretionary dollars, anytime there's competitive dollars, figuring out how do we partner and make sure that either the state leads or the state's supporting, other lead in order to make sure we capture as many dollars as possible. So either through the innovation hubs or it just as an example, as a for example. So we're definitely thinking that piece through, and also talking with our partners across state government, including the new infrastructure office that the governor created a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, appreciate those comments.
Yeah, I think, just to make sure, because I can imagine Jane Public picking this up, and a question always comes up, what are we giving up to do this? And so trying to, I think, highlight many of the things that you suggested, like where are some of the dollars, where there's some opportunities, where are some of the places where we might be able to draw on additional support so that we don't end up saying, well, we're not going to feed seniors because we're doing this. You know what I mean? That's an extreme example. You know, I know we're not doing that, but you know.
It still made me concerned.
No.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. And I do think the benefit of this conversation right now is there are infrastructure dollars and federal dollars that create a sort of once in a lifetime opportunity. And this is a challenge that certainly meets that category, if that makes sense. So.
Hey, Phyllis, can I ask you a follow-up question? Is that okay?
Of course.
Thanks. So when you were talking about, you mentioned the different ways that people can look at the EJ issue, and then you mentioned workforce, and then you talked about the funding issues as well. Are there other places too, in addition to those, that you think ought to be looked at as part of the plan?
Yeah, you know, always, you know, I go to geography. And, you know, obviously there are places in the state who are suffering disproportionately because of climate impacts. And so being able to, that's why I said to be more inclusive about how we think about it. It's not just, it's justice for all, but there's some who need it more.
Got it.
So
Okay.
lifting that up, you know.
Thanks. I just want to make sure I was capturing it and didn't miss something. So.
Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I always want to
let's see.
I know but you just look like a Scott to me. I'm sorry.
That's all right. My third grade teacher called me Scott all the way through. It doesn't bother me, really. Jim, you had your hand up and then you put it down. Did you want to? And you were next in line. Do you want to?
Yeah, real quick. And mine's more of a process kind of question. So in relation to proactive strategies, is there a way in which those strategies could be captured by like responsible entity? In other words, you know, strategies that may require collaboration, public-private collaboration, state and business or labor, those strategies that might be executive in nature, those strategies that might have a legislative component to them, statutory component to them. I don't know if that would be helpful or not, but in relation, because there's those strategies that we must do, high priority strategies, but also are very complicated in order to execute. And so, but there are also strategies that are less complicated, may not be the big thing, but are really things we can do right now, kind of. That's where my question's coming from.
Yep. Somebody from Eagle want to take that one?
It doesn't necessarily require an answer, just a thought, you know, on looking at this. That's all. Not necessarily require an answer, just some feedback. That's all.
James is dying to respond though, so we're gonna let him.
I'll say is that it was a week or two after we got the draft plan out, there is a new appendix on the website, and it talked about some of the early kind of recommendations out of the work group in which state agency or which branch of government we saw kind of controlling that lever. Now, we didn't go to the outside entities of the private sector, labor, et cetera, but I do think that's something we can consider going forward, especially on those key strategies that we identify. I think on the website, it's, you know, Appendix A, I think, for the draft plan.
Thanks, Jim. Darrell?
Thanks, Doug. And I have to apologize. My camera is acting up, so that's why you're not seeing me. So actually, two questions. One on, I know there in the past we've talked about, you know, once the plan has been finalized and completed, there would be I guess the setting up of implementation groups or however that would go. The quick glance, it's not on the screen, but I may have missed this, but will there be a conversation around how that process will work? kind of laying out, and not necessarily having all the details there, but just some general like principles on how that process will work, ensuring that that all folks have a real opportunity to be part of those implementation work groups. And then my other question is something I've brought up, and I know others have talked about on previous council meetings, the issue of affordability. I didn't, this again, seeing the outline, I didn't see that kind of either pulled up or that being pretty prominent in any of the changes. Just based off the outline, it may be embedded in kind of how you all are thinking about how the report will be, but just those two questions there. So.
I think Corey might have put his hand up in order to respond to that.
Yeah, I don't know what the etiquette is for me to respond. I'll take my hand down now. Thanks, Darrell, for the question. So,
yep.
In reverse order, when thinking about some of the affordability items, I think what's kind of missed in that outline is that we both added a new section on environmental justice that's meant to have, that same type of North Star goal, key priority strategies, and then background discussion and discussion of those key strategies and priorities and how we may or may not want to move forward. Also, within each of the sections following that, we are trying to incorporate environmental justice related priorities, but that have specific application to that subsector. So there may be something around affordability with a variety of metrics at our fingertips or policy tools. But we are actively thinking about that kind of as it relates across all those sections. And so it doesn't come through in that way because it's not a specific call out. Like there will be overarching cross-cutting environmental justice issues in the environmental justice section. And then there will be some specific things like you might be looking at around affordability or something like that in those specific sector conversations. And then the other one around implementation, I think we do intend to include some conversation around that. I think sort of backing out from what Jim was saying around some of our big high-level strategies are really complicated. I think what we're hoping to do is to be able to distill it all the way back down to like, what is that first unlocking step that needs to happen to move towards some of those bigger goals? And we're still figuring out what that implementation looks like and what that process looks like. But welcome feedback for sure. And I hope that helps provide a little bit of clarity.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Corey.
And Darrell, to that point, because this was one of the questions I was going to ask the group anyway. So in terms of implementation, what to Corey's point, what is, Darrell, in your mind, what is one of the first things that we should do in terms of implementation? How should we approach that going forward?
Yeah, just my thoughts. I'd love to hear other folks' thoughts, but I think really assessing, how we are communicating the opportunity or just really talking about being part of this, the actual action plan that will come out of this process. This I think as much as possible, just rethink, how we're communicating, who we're reaching out to. I mean, that could be as little as like, hey, what email list are we, or what folks are we emailing? Are we missing folks to be part of the process? I think that's how you're going to expand the pool and make sure that folks are missing. I think it'll help out in terms of moving forward a lot of these really large, ambitious goals that we're gonna need to push. And then I think that's a starting point. I think that is something we need to focus on. But yeah, would love to hear other folks' thoughts.
Yeah. If I could just piggyback on that, I think listing, none of this is going to be done just by the state. This is going to require partners, right? So I think listing the partners we have on board as a start, and getting some clarity around, are there sectors who we either have agreed to or anticipate will take some leadership role in facilitating the work. I just don't think this could be a one office with a few staff endeavor. This is going to be, all hands on deck to do this. So that's one I would offer, is the partnership of sectors. And then the reality is it's not all going to be done in a year. So really thinking through the phases of the work, what's going to be done, and then maybe yearly, I don't know, you guys probably know better than me, or every 2 years, what's the cadence of, of the trajectory. So really getting that laid out.
Great, thanks. Very helpful. Let's see, we got a pretty good queue build up. Good. Sam Stolper?
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, everybody. First, I just want to give a vote of confidence to what Corey just said. I noticed the sort of EJ section pullout in the new outline, and my instinctive thought was like, well, that seems good. It's a spotlight, but also I think a common criticism is that we silo environmental justice, and so if it's just there and not in the transportation section itself, then we're not doing it proper justice. So that sounded good. I had one easy procedural question. Just wondering, I've started to go through some of the comments, and I got a chance to attend some of the EJ listening session on the 14th of this month. I was just wondering if there is or could possibly be a transcript of the EJ listening session, because as I start to read through these written comments, I realize that that's, the oral comments are not shown in here, and I really would like to give special focus to that EJ listening session set of comments. And then more generally, I feel a little inexperienced and unclear on the process for discussing and deciding how to respond to or what to respond to with regard to this feedback. There's so much of it, but I think it's really valuable. And the more I read, the more I see that there's so much repetition in things like comments about public transportation, comments about nuclear, some things, comments about low income and EJ communities, and it seems like I just want to know how we're going to approach the response process to that, if possible. Thanks.
Does anybody have a thought on the transcript of the meeting?
Yeah, I'll check with our folks. The meeting is you can watch it yourself. It's posted, but we can check. I think there's various transcription services available that we've used on occasion, so we might be able to utilize one of those if people would like a transcript of that. Obviously, there's 3 or 4 of us taking pretty copious notes, and therefore we are comparing notes after the fact and kind of trying to flag those issues that we think need to be addressed in the plan. So that is happening, assure you of that. And there's continues to be a lot of discussion happening in that area at the MAC EJ level and others, and we're waiting for some additional feedback to come in those areas.
Thanks.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, Sam. Brandon?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I was just going to react to your question about implementation focus areas. So as I think about actionable next steps, a couple areas come up, and I may have mentioned these before, but I'll repeat them just since you asked the questions. One umbrella that Liesl already mentioned is just leveraging all this, both state and federal money. And so I don't know if that's its own implementation section or if it's a subsection of everything, but that just feels like, to me, in the next couple of years, that's where a lot of state policy is going to be made, is through the power of the budget. And so I really think leaning into that is going to be important. Then I think there's near-term stuff that's already ongoing in state government around electric vehicles and mass transit funding. Part of the implementation of the federal funds from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act are going to require MDOT to do a kind of EV charging plan for the state. The utilities both have EV charging. So I think there's work to be done on creating an EV charging network that is ready for 2 million vehicles. And then there's also work that MEDC is doing to attract the EV manufacturing industry of the future to Michigan as well, that I think it's worth lifting up in this report if others think that that has a place to it, place in it as well. So I think there could be some EV, a real focus on EV and transportation and public transit. I'm very fully supportive of making that important as well. Energy affordability and energy burden on low-income customers and energy efficiency. You know, again, there's federal and state funds that can be applied to that. I think there's possibilities where we could reimagine utility energy efficiency programs and really help to address affordability issues. So I would lift that up as a possibility for this report. And then the final I've mentioned in the past is just renewable energy siting. As we've been aggressively implementing our clean energy vision, we have, as I've mentioned, run into some challenges in just getting renewable energy projects built. And so I think that could be something that a broad coalition of environmental, labor, the solar industry, the utility industry could collaborate on, trying to work with local governments and other barriers to you know, just aggressively building out the renewable energy that we need. So when you ask the question, those were kind of 4 near-term areas that really came to mind for me.
Thanks, Brent. Does the siting, Brandon, also apply to transmission, or is it more just on the renewable side? Or is it both?
It could. I think I would prioritize personally the renewable siting. You know, the transmission siting, as you know, is a kind of a bigger national issue that's going to require regional planning. And Michigan has decent transmission siting laws already in place. So I don't know that there's a lot at the state level that needs to be done there, is my own opinion. But it's related as sure.
Thanks. Cynthia and then Chairman Scripps. Cynthia?
Just on the implementation, I do think we should, you know, as we prioritize things, we must first understand and quantify the impacts of the action that we're going to take. And so I think that'll play a huge part as to what we do first. And, you know, I agree with Phyllis. We need to, you know, put things in phases. And as we draw that, you know, action plan out to 2030, 2050, let's, you know, put them in chunks in terms of quick wins that we can do now, and then understanding what's feasible in the time frame that we have with the dollars that we have. Also, as we build out the infrastructure, I think it's critical to coordinate infrastructure, you know, state by state, you know, coordinated, whether it's through the governors or through, you know, C40 cities or whatnot. We need to coordinate the deployment of infrastructure. And then as we look at infrastructure, we need to be mindful of that we need to satisfy both retail and commercial vehicle customers. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to just echo, I think, what Phyllis and Cynthia have both been talking about in terms of implementation. That Phyllis's comment that it's not done in a year, and then Cynthia putting the implementation in phases and chunks. I totally agree. I think one of the reasons that it's important that we're calling out sort of the 2030 goals in this is sort of a way of organizing our thinking and immediate term focus is just, I mean, it's now 2022, it's 8 years away to get to ambitious 2030 goals. We either have to have already been started or get to started right away. And so I think that focuses the attention maybe in a way that 2050 doesn't. In terms of what do we have to do today, either that's already ongoing and needs to be accelerated, or that needs to get started in order to get to a certain place by the end of the decade that's consistent with, you know, the goals that the governor's called out, 52% reduction by then as part of 100% economy-wide by 2050. And so it's not to discount some of the pieces around innovation and some places where we probably need jumps in technology or stuff that's really difficult to get our arms around, but we need to do that too. And some of that we need to start today in order to make sure that the 2030 to 2050 piece sort of keeps pace with the progress. But I really do think by organizing a lot of these North Star goals around 2030, what the world looks like in Michigan in 2030, it then calls into question what is the stuff that we have to do now in terms of prioritizing the implementation and what is phase one. So I just wanted to agree with Phyllis and Cynthia's comments on that point.
Great, thank you. And if you've got a list of what those items should be to start with, I'm sure you'll share that with us too. Those ones that should have already started or need to start right away. Great, thanks. Jim, and then Mary.
There we go. I'm trying to come off mute. Sorry about
All
that,
right.
Doug. So
No, we're good.
actually 3, and Brandon hit one that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and that is the siting issue and bringing together, particularly if we are developing a robust renewable energy goal, we have to have this siting somehow figured out. And that should be stakeholders, resources, folks that have resources as well, so that would be utilities, but also the major business community that is saying, listen, we want to have a certain percentage or all of our energy renewable, labor and number, so stakeholders and resource providers to be able to sit down and figure this out, because it is a significant roadblock from meeting those emission goals that we're looking at, particularly on the generation side, as well as what that means for communities. So there's one. The second thing that I think that we can jump into fairly soon as well is figuring out what we can do to improve our aging housing stock and line it up for energy efficiency. So that is, what I saw was already over $100 million potentially identified in the governor's budget to do something with either energy efficiency or some kind of improvement on our aging, because we are a state with a lot of old housing stock. If there's a way in which we can help people, repair their roofs, get new doors, windows, those kinds of things, in addition then into energy efficiency, so we don't have this walkaway issue, that would be significant. I think that would really help a number of ways. That's going to help our residential, small business residential emissions issue that we have in the state, as well as reduce energy burden for people, give people a little bit extra money in their that they are not now spending for energy costs to be able to do other things. So there's the second thing. The third thing is, which I don't know is legislative, fix or not, but we have an idea of thinking of what the EV penetration is going to be in Michigan, but as we know, this cars, particularly for non-fleet vehicles, people keep cars a long time. And so the ability for us to really get there may be a little bit further than what we think. In the interim, there might be some things that we can do around low carbon fuel standard that help bridge in ways in which that might be able to, once again, I haven't quite figured out how the pathway might be, but I think that is a short-term thing that we can start looking at now and be able to really do some deep emissions reductions in our transportation sector. So that's my top 3.
And when you say LCFS, are you looking at Michigan only or regional?
Well, if there's, frankly, if there's a way that Michigan can partner on a regional side, I think that would be, a step in the right direction, because then what you're doing is you're both leveraging, opportunities for investment and what that looks like, right? So something like a RGGI, only it's in a regional, fashion. I think that may be a way in which Michigan doesn't have to do it on its own.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Mary.
Yeah, Doug, hi, thanks. For those of you who haven't had a chance to read all the comments, please take some time to do it. They're interesting. I think there's some really interesting perspectives on the plan. The one thing I think that continues to be one for us in terms of the industry is the targets that we've set. We have already set our own targets. The plan lays out are significantly more aggressive. I think that we all want to be part of the work that we're doing to decarbonize. I think it would be helpful if we either said, okay, we can, here's everybody's piece of that target. And Cynthia, I see you nodding your head. I can see you on my screen, but I think for us, this gets, it's kind of like the same thing as we look to decarbonize, period. IEA has said, this particular sector needs to get this far, this particular sector needs to get that far. I think we really got to get some either get a bit more granular or go back to some of us who've already set targets, very aggressive targets for our industry and say, okay, look, what can you do to help us, or how could we revise the targets to be frankly more meaningful? And I know we had a lot of discussion about this early on about how those targets were identified. And I think there are some sectors that are going to be, frankly, a little bit, I hate to use the term easier, but that's the only one I can come up with at this point. But I think you're going to have a little bit more success faster than some of us who are in more hard to decarbonize industries.
What's the best way to do that, Mary? Is it in an implementation team setting? Is it individually going back to companies that have got targets? What's the best way to do that?
Well, I can see a couple of my colleagues on the phone. I mean, I maybe Ron or Cynthia, you might have some thoughts on that. I mean, and I don't know how you feel about that, but I think for us, it would be good if you got your, frankly, maybe start with the hard to decarbonize industries and then, work your way through some of the others. I mean, we all have thoughts on this. They're all going to be a little bit different. But I think, it would go a long way to getting us all, frankly aligned. We all want this to improve the economic condition of the state. I think that's, really important. And then secondarily, frankly, you can put them one or two, but this is how you attract more business to the state. But it's also, we have an emergency issue here called climate change. We're all committed to that. I don't know if you've tapped into all of our resources as well as we can to help with that target. Just a thought.
We could dedicate some time.
Cynthia, do you want to follow up on that?
I said we could dedicate some time in the implementation discussions to bring in the different views and have folks just share their learnings and their targets, where they're headed and the time frame in which we're doing it in. So absolutely agree with you, Mary.
Ron, your name was used in debate. Do you want to jump in here and add?
I concur. No, no. I mean, I think I think getting into that implementation and where the built environment where we can provide most, and I think we did provide quite a bit in the working group there. I think how do we integrate that implementation? I think I provided some of that feedback in the written comments. So I think just to follow up on that and how we do that for sure between home and mobility and all that obviously is probably one of the bigger linkages, right? Because it has the most impact on what the grid impacts will be and the path you want to do to get that right transition correct, right? So that, because inequality issues, if we don't get that right, and some of the other things, and even grid reliability or resiliency will be somewhat at risk. So essentially, I guess I'm just repeating what everybody else said, so I guess I should just shut up now. So. But yeah.
No, that's all right. That's helpful. Thank you. Phyllis, your hand is still up. Did you want to go again or no? Okay. It's okay if you do. How about other folks we haven't heard from yet? And either on is the, what Director Clark laid out, is that the right direction for how the restructuring of the report is, or this implementation question, which we've gotten into here, which is great. What are the next steps, or the first best steps, I guess, in terms of implementation? So Carrie, go right ahead.
Hi, gang. DIA was lovely, but I'm back at my desk now. I guess I'll respond on the first part, and going back to Phyllis's comment at the very beginning of the call. I really applaud the treatment of EJ in considering the next turn on this draft. I often use the term slingshot. I've probably said it to you guys on the call of, these communities that have been facing hardship beyond what I can imagine, certainly growing up where I did, making sure that they are brought from behind and into world class as we get all these federal dollars, this once in a generation investment. But one of the things I think you have to remember is before you can even get those dollars is that the lack of capacity in these communities. So something I've been noodling on, and you kind of heard it on the last call, is how this document lands in the public's eye and how attractive it is to work in city, state, federal government. I'd really love this to be something that entices people to come home and come back to communities where they're from and to do this work. I mean, you can see with the state staff that are here on the phone, I know how much work you guys have put into this, and there's a lot of talent out there, and I'd really like to see that drive, because that capacity, I totally am obsessed with the places that have low capacity to actually be able to have the technical chops to go after the resources that we're talking about. That's what worries me. We can have all the best ideas in the world, but without that local capacity. So I just want you to consider that as you think about environmental justice, and applaud the team for putting that kind of centered here.
Hey,
Thanks,
Gary,
Doug.
can I follow up with you on that? So in terms of the implementation steps, until you get to the point where enough folks do come home and want to do this work in communities, so out of the blocks, what's the best way for this group plus this group and state workers? What's the best way to make that outreach and make sure that we're involving all the communities in the best way?
I think, Phyllis, there's a ton of institutional knowledge with Kresge's investments over the years on capacity building. We are very lucky to have them here in Michigan. So tapping into that expertise from both their sort of Detroit and their national team would be smart. I think Mary's talked about regional partnerships. We can look outside of Michigan. I will hint to you, there's a national laboratory that's not far from Michigan that has full of Michigan expats that want to do good work here. So that's a big hint for you of something that's coming down. And then Peck, who I don't see on the screen, but I know he's on the call, the kind of thinking that he's doing, coming to Michigan from a land grant university. And we have a land grant university, what can we do collaborating probably better than we ever have through our institutions. There's different ways through, MSU has extension, and there's work that Peck's been putting into motion with U of M. So not excluding the other institutions in the state, but where we have that existing institutional capacity, it's just like doubling down. Maybe those relationships don't exist in the ways they ought to, but we are really up against a clock. So it's time that we find new and creative solutions. So that's one way. In the federal space, which, I still spend some time over there. I've been looking at things like the IPA, which is a really underutilized tool. If you're familiar with that, if we have something akin at the state government, I don't know, I'm ignorant if you do, Director Clark, I have no clue, but looking at those different personnel possibilities of detailing employees in and out and building that feedback loop, that institutional capacity. People who understand federal government are different than people who understand state government, are different than people who understand city government. So, and then you corporates, my friends here that I see a lot of between Cynthia, Mary, and Ron, maybe you're sponsoring programs like this already. And so daylighting those opportunities where you might already be doing neat programs through your, philanthropic arms. That's a big question mark. I don't know.
Know if anybody wanted to respond to that on the corporate side, or no? Okay.
Well, Doug, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Mary, please.
Carrie just makes some good points. I don't know if anybody else, but they're all good points. And I think that, we have things that we're working on that we can bring to light here. So, I guess I would say, and I'm not going to speak for, but I will just maybe characterize this. Climate and carbon for us is any immediate and emergency priority kind of thing. I think this is the top ESG issue that we deal with. And with all the others that everyone has talked about here. So, we're very aligned on that in principle. I think how we get there is probably the thing that we may not all, we may not fully agree on. But, back to some of my original comments, we have to do this so that we can do it in manageable chunks that lead us to our goal, but also help the state advance without getting ahead of federally, set mandates, et cetera. That for me is really important.
Thanks. There's a few folks that I haven't heard from yet. Peck, I don't know if your camera's working enough, but if you're on the phone, do you have anything you'd like to add in here?
Yeah, I've been trying relentlessly to get online, and for some reason I cannot.
Yeah, I figured we couldn't see your hand, so I figured I'd just call on you.
Yeah, so I've been muted. Yeah, so I don't think I have a comment right now other than to cheers for what Carrie just said. We really do need to figure out ways to all work together on this. But I didn't prepare anything.
Okay, it's okay. And how about Phil or Marnice? Anything that you'd like to add here? I'm just making sure everybody's got had a shot
could-
here to talk
I
about
could
the
say something, but
restructuring of the
defer to
plan, so.
Marnice first. if she has
Okay.
something.
Marnice?
I actually really agree with some of the comments, but I'm very process oriented. What will be our role in the action step in the implementation part of this, as council members? Because I do think there should be some type of oversight committee when this money comes down, but then also to go back to a point that was made about the EJ, it should just not be a silo thing. It should be infused into every part of the plan. Even if we have to take a step back, I understand the sense of urgency, but if we Google what sense of urgency falls under, then we're gonna get some mess, and EJ communities will be hurt. So I just like to know the process, because council members, we will of course like to help, but we want to know exactly where our role would be.
Yeah, let me turn director or James or Corey, whoever
I think I
wants
can
to.
start, and then
Yeah.
if anyone wants to chime in, that'd be great. So I think Marnie's is asking a great question. So from a process perspective, as the council doesn't go away, I think it's important that the council remain, and that we have regular conversations, with the development of the plan. So we were interested in your all's feedback as to how to build the implementation components. I sort of see those as being, to a certain extent, the more granular conversation about the plan. So the council will be meeting regularly and having conversations about, what work is ongoing around the plan. Going way back to an early comment that I think it was Mary who made, there's no delusions of grandeur here. None of this can be done with silver bullet from a state perspective, state government perspective. It's something that really requires work across all stakeholder groups, across all parties at the state, in order to make a difference. And so we're seeing we're going to build the implementation teams. And so again, interested in everyone's feedback about how to structure that. And then the council, of course, continues to meet, receive updates as to what work's happening under the plan, and then how it's moving forward. There are pieces that live in other places too. For example, when you think about it, like from a get the dollars out the door perspective, please, nobody feel like there's not a ton of work happening in the state right now. From a administration perspective, from an executive branch perspective, about getting those dollars out the door. So what do I mean by that? A lot of people were involved in getting the ARA dollars out the door way back in 2008, 2009, 2010. And some of that entailed a lot of work to figure out how to build the most effective mechanisms to get the dollars out the door efficiently and effectively. So when I was doing my 2022 planning for Eagle itself, the thing that kept coming up for me was, how do we administer those dollars in the best way possible to get the dollars to communities to make a difference? And I know that, my department colleagues are all thinking the same thing. And then there's a couple of different unifying entities, like one level above, to try to pull together how are state departments programs being crafted in a way that they support each other. And again, that the dollars are being administered effectively and efficiently. So there are a lot of pieces that are happening in that world that, certainly, the council in its advisory capacity, can be made aware of. And then I'm trying to remember, I think James mentioned it earlier. Another one of our really important advisory councils at Eagle is the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. And so there's been a lot of dialogue with them too about what does the plan look like, and what are the components within the plan around environmental justice, and making sure that it's the attention spans the breadth of the plan. And then the last thing I'll mention is state government is also working hard to understand the federal government's Justice 40 initiative, which some people may be aware of, is a policy that governs how dollars get out the door, and making sure that large proportion of dollars get spent in environmental justice or overburdened communities. So the federal government is figuring out like what sort of rules do they have around implementation of those dollars? And that will also be a layer on top of how do dollars get out the door. So I spanned a lot of things from the role of the advisory council to how the implementation teams will interact to how does budgeting play out across a bunch of departments that aren't my authority. So hopefully that was helpful.
Thanks, Director.
I
I see my
can-
niece is nodding, so yes, thanks.
I can
And
add
Phil, you were
something.
gonna say something?
Sure. Sorry, Jim, do you have just some quick comment? No, I guess not.
I think you're up.
Yeah, okay. So I guess overall have a little positive feedback on the outline overall. I think I saw a lot in there. I mean, that gives me a lot of hope that in the next draft, some of the things that came up in the public comment section, some of the feedback probably I and others shared gets reflected. It was really helpful I went through the public comments in a lot of detail, and there's some really clear themes, and maybe I'll just share my take on those because I see some aspects of each of these that seem like they're appearing more prominently in the outline, and I'm really encouraged by that. One is just the overall level of ambition and specificity in the plan. I mean, we'll hopefully, I would just give a lot of encouragement to go as bold as we can, understanding constraints and all of that, but not let apparent hurdles impede our ambition. So if there's a hurdle that causes us to set maybe a lower near-term goal, maybe we can pair that with a longer-term goal with some things that'll happen that'll help us to get there. So that's sort of overall. But then the other key points, I'm really hopeful about the increased prominence overall and then within each topic area of the EJ stuff. I think that's just really important. This isn't going to work unless we nail that. And Liesl, you mentioned Justice 40. I know that's one that there's a yearning to really get as specific as we can there, and some of the other areas that are listed. More as aggressive as we can be on the clean energy targets. I think you see that pretty repeatedly in the public comments. Addressing electrification, building electrification in a more prominent way. And then one thing that in the mobility area, I guess, just raising the prominence of VMT and transit. And I see some nods to that in the outline, and encouraged by that. I mean, a couple areas that I'm still wondering about. It seems like if we're going to really lay out, be even more specific about what 2030 looks like, it would be great, as some people have mentioned, to get as close as we can to what impacts where that's going to leave us in 2030. And I know we haven't done and probably aren't going to do all the formal modeling. Tell me if I'm wrong on that between now and when this gets issued, but I think we've got some reporting that's out there, the Green Link report and others that can at least give us some guidelines maybe for what kind of reductions we might get, as well as impacts on jobs and other aspects, other positive impacts, health impacts. And last thing, I still am yearning for this to really look like a Michigan-centric plan that I love what Carrie said about something that those who have left our communities, our state, will want to come back. That includes industries and people. And I just love, I mean, I gave some thoughts to that with James and Corey about a way that might be highlighted at the beginning of the report. And it may be in there in the sort of vision for 2050, vision for 2030, but kind of the master strategy that organizes the rest of what we're doing. I would just love for that to, not look like any other state's plan, even though there's obviously a lot of common elements. That's all.
It was good. Thank you. Okay. Let me just check. We're at time to go to the next section on next steps, but just want to make sure that somebody else didn't have a comment. Phyllis, your hand's still up, so you're trying to trick me again, or is that just up from before?
Maybe just look this mouse or something. I'm hitting it. I'm sorry,
Okay.
but but since it
Go
was,
ahead.
maybe I meant just echo the comment that I almost feel remiss. I felt embarrassed that I didn't suggest this, and that is is to, if I could just lift up the health impact statement. If we do this, what does it really mean? I always think about the average Joe picking this up, and that I'd like them to know that this is adding to the quality of their lives and their health. So that's it. So maybe it was up. It was just one of those subliminal kind of, I don't know. I'll try to keep the mouse away from it, the pointer away from it.
Can I just build on what Phyllis said?
Please.
I think there are examples in the draft report of backward-looking health impacts from emissions reductions that have already happened and things like that. And so really, for me, it's about projecting that forward and just making sure we have that in there. Even if it's a swag, having something in there that reminds people why we're doing this.
Great, thanks. Niles, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I just, on the public transportation, public transit conversation,
Yeah.
I just want to offer some resources that we might be able to provide you, even though MDOT doesn't operate any transit fleets or agencies. We do have a recently developed transit strategic plan for the state, which might provide some kind of framework for a more detailed discussion. And we also have an active transportation plan, which I'd be happy to share with the team, which is focused more on increasing mobility through non-automobiles. So just offering myself as some resource if you want some more information. And in the chat, I did put a link to a new environmental justice screening tool that the Council on Environmental Quality put together. Again, just a resource if anybody wants to take a look at that or if it'd be helpful in your discussions. So, thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and I know there's some people out there around the country who are, if you guys think it would be helpful, who are trying to help interpret all of that as well, the screening tool. And I saw a good presentation last week where people actually had some maps and comparing it, say, to the old EJ screen and looking at the difference between them. So there are some substantial differences there. That so thanks, Niles, for doing that, because that's an important point. James?
Yeah, real quick. On that point, I was just looking at that today, circulated particularly with an organization that does a lot of work in Appalachia, and looking at how that overlays in Michigan, and there's some really interesting data there. So that I don't know how robust that is. There's some discussion on the methodology that was used for that, but it is very interesting if folks are interested in looking at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, James. Anybody else? Great discussion, everybody. Thank you. That was wonderful. Lots of great points. Director, want me to turn it back to you for any next steps?
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. A couple of points on the last line of communication too. Every time we have these meetings, I'm excited for our data modeler. So we've been hiring, and I think that's going to be a really important addition to the work that we do, so that we can, really incorporate the numbers component in a more in-depth way. So really looking forward to that, and I know all of you are too. And it's interesting. Phyllis, your comments really, I think, line up well with some of the reading I was doing over the weekend. I was reading some language around leadership and service. And, the one comment was, how does this action serve others? And I think we'd do well to, come at it from your perspective, which I feel like it's always in your questions, or how did we set it up so that it's in service? And so we can think about the report in that way too. And then the final thing I wanted to mention was the White House did come out with their new environmental justice screening tool last week. Michigan's been working on a revision for some time now, and we've had really good partnership across state government agencies, as well as work with the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice. And so our screening tool will be out for public comment here in Q1 2022. So I think that those maps and the data overlay are really important ways to frame our thinking and to help us prioritize our efforts. And so certainly looking forward to lots of feedback on that tool. So, you know, like the plan, it can just get better with additional feedback. So that's coming soon. And I know some folks here will be interested. So appreciate all of the conversation today. I think that this, again, helps us from the crafting of the plan perspective, really make sure that we're focused and organized around what we need to be prioritizing, and also that we have a variety of input in order to just make this plan better and better all the time. So wanted to point out that we've got a meeting scheduled for March 8th. With the change in our timeline, we're thinking that it probably makes sense to hold that meeting later. And so what we're going to do is we're going to send you all a poll to look at a couple of dates after that and see what works best for folks. We think that since we're just going to be we'll still be in public comment on the 8th. It probably makes sense for our next meeting to be after we have public comment so that we can pull things together and then talk about delivering the plan when we get together next. So just look for that. And then of course, to those of you who are not council members following along at home, that material or that will be posted on our environmental event calendar that Eagle has. And of course, you know, we'll send out appropriate social media and email updates on that as well. So with that, that we've gone through everything that we wanted to talk about here today. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to give you 9 minutes back and say thank you for all of your time and energy. I really mean it very sincerely. I think that we're just getting better and better with all of this feedback, and it just warms my heart to hear people talk about the different sets of comments that they've read through, you know, Sam participating in listening sessions. Like I think that really makes for very rich feedback from all of you, which just makes the plan better. So I'm very grateful. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time and energy.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.